Good afternoon, hello, my name is Daniel, this is the TriathlonDan YouTube channel, and if my helmet hair doesn't give it away already, I can confirm in my free time I ride bikes, on-road, off-road, all sorts. And that is what this video is about, but it is a little bit different, so bear with me. Now, firstly, I don't think that I should have to, or anybody should have to, make videos about this, about what I'm doing, but I actually want to make this video. I want to take some action about something that means a lot to me and hopefully might mean a lot to you too. All too often I am seeing either on social media or in the mainstream media, I'm seeing vulnerable road users either injured, killed or whatever on our roads in Britain today. And this is something that I, and maybe you watching this video, experience a lot. Maybe you have had a driver close past you, maybe you've had somebody pull out on you, maybe you've been abused on the road. And I know cyclists are not perfect, cyclists do a lot of bad things. I'm trying not to tar all drivers with the same brush, and I'd ask that drivers don't tar all cyclists with the same brush. In this video I'm going to talk to you about my experiences on the road over the last few years and more recently over the last couple of months, and what I'm going to do about it. To be honest, I feel completely sick with worry about seeing a news article or hearing a message about one of my friends or family going out on a bike ride and not getting to go home. And so for that reason, I have a fresh sense of, right, I want to do whatever I can to take positive action to try and make my local cycling area safer. And if I can benefit the wider community, and if any little message gets out there and it has a positive effect on whatever is happening, then I'm all for that as well. If you follow this channel for some time, you've probably seen that when I'm out cycling, I have often shared footage of incidents I've come across. Perhaps I've been close past, or perhaps something's happened that I've not been quite happy with. I've never been shy of sharing it, but that's all well and good for a YouTube click. What I'm trying to do is take some positive action to actually try and correct some behaviour if it needs correcting in the first place. So over the last couple of years, actually, I have been reporting things to Derbyshire Police. That's where I live, in Derbyshire, and Derbyshire Police have an online portal called Operation Snap. Anybody, drivers, vulnerable road users, horse riders, walkers, anybody can submit footage, and the police will then decide, has an offence taken place, yes or no, and if so, what action do they take? It doesn't make you a vigilante, you're not taking actions into your own hands, you're just reporting things to them. And I've been doing that for a little while, and I'm careful about whether to say with mixed success, because I don't really know what success is. When I've reported things, some things have been progressed, as in gone to, drivers have been sent a warning letter, or have been sent an education letter, or in some cases no further action. And whenever I get any sort of those outcomes, I'm not happy or anything, I'm indifferent. I'm well, I'd rather not experience that first thing in the first place. But that's what I've been doing. But I have been finding that some things that I think are really bad aren't getting any action taken. And after speaking to a couple of people, they have said, well, you've not got a front and rear camera, and perhaps you've not got a wide enough angle of view, and basically perhaps the evidence I'm providing isn't good enough. And I thought, if I'm going through the stress of going through a ride and having a bad experience and dealing with that, and then coming home and writing about it and sharing some footage about it, I might as well make sure the footage is good and able to be taken action if appropriate.
Get the van.
I hit the van because you nearly got me off my bike.
No, I didn't push off your bike.
You were right next to me.
I was coming. I've got a fucking trailer. Right. Not one of you fucking turned and looked. Not one of you. No, you fucking weren't. You never fucking moved. Mate, I sounded the
It's life and death.
You get honest with trailer. You're riding across the middle of the fucking road. What am I meant to fucking do?
How long were you behind for?
What am I meant to fucking do?
20 seconds?
What am I meant to fucking do?
Well, just pull over. Just give us a minute to pull over.
You weren't looking. You didn't want to look at.
We're looking in front of us, we're riding the bike.
Not one of you. The prick of the back's giving it that, not even fucking looking.
That's not great. Do you want to give us a bit more space next time? You absolutely come right on my shoulder.
Yeah.
I could have touched the van, you nearly knocked me off.
Well, why do you want me to go? Because you're in the middle of the road.
There was nothing coming the other way, we can ride two abreast. There was nothing coming the other way.
Well, he's round the corner in the middle of the road.
You're driving a van, I'm on a bike. You could kill me if you knock me off. You were coming at what, 60 mile an hour? How can we even hear you? Whatever you were doing, give us some time, give us some space. You're at work, for God's sake.
Yeah,
can you be more stupid? Do you want to lose your job? That's just ridiculous, isn't it? We're all out there just trying to stay safe and just have a nice bike ride outside, and you're trying to get a job done, so just think a little bit.
Yeah, but
right.
just riding in the road,
yeah, as we can do. Two abreast is absolutely fine. It's a quiet Sunday morning. Yes, on a 40 mile an hour road. Read the highway code. You can ride two abreast. If it was a narrow road or busy, we'd drop down to single file. But you coming by at God knows what speed, really close to us, doesn't help at all.
What do you expect when you're in the middle of
I expect you to slow down, give us a minute and come round with enough space.
invisible. Hey! Oh!
And that's where Cycliq come in. So Cycliq are an Australian brand and they make what is essentially a dash cam for your bike. Now you should consider this video an advert. They have sent me these cameras for free. I asked for them, they didn't approach me. I want to embark on this project or this, I don't know, way of life for me, and I wanted to, you know, get kitted out with the relevant products. Now these cameras aren't cheap, I mean that's entirely subjective, but the setup that I've got, so the Fly 6 Pro and the Fly 12 Sport bundle is about £700, you know, in sterling, in British money. So it's not a small amount of money. However, there's a lot of tech in there, and I'm really not trying to make this a sales advert. If you want something, you want the gold standard, it does cost some money, and I essentially wanted the gold standard so that I can do those things that I've just spoke about. Now, I'm not going to bore you by reading you the spec sheet. If you're interested in those sorts of things, I'm sure you can read it online. I'll leave a link in the description down below. What I'm going to be talking about is what I've been using these cameras for. I'll show you some footage from the cameras, and I'll talk to you about what they're actually like to use and live with. If you want to read the brochure, you can go and do that on your own time, not on mine. So the rear camera is the Fly 6 Pro, and the front one is the Fly 12 Sport. A lot of names, but they're essentially very similar, but just obviously one is for rear pointing and one is for front pointing, and the lights are different. So I'm going to start by talking a bit about what have these been like to live with. I normally run lights on my bike anyway, even if I didn't have cameras on my bike, so I'm not used to charging things to go on a bike and having a front and lights put on all the time. I genuinely run those all the time anyway. The rear camera is mounted with like a Velcro strap. If I'm honest, I thought that this wouldn't be very strong and it'd be wiggling all over the place. I put some electrical tape underneath the strap just to protect my seat post, but it's actually really, really firm. It doesn't move at all, and I swing the bike around quite a lot and ride on some rough ground. The front one has several mounting options depending which thing you want and what bars you've got. You can either bolt it to your handlebars, but because I'm a wannabe age group triathlete, I have clip-on bars. I've just got a GoPro mount, and there's a little attachment for this camera to go on there. I'll actually not use the Cycliq computer mount, not for any particular reason other than I already have this one on the bike with a GoPro attachment. I do have the Cycliq one on my other bike, so I can just flip them between it. What I particularly like about the GoPro mount for the front light is that I can adjust the angle very easily as well. That's probably the same if you have round bars and you bolt it to your bars, but I do like being able to tilt it up and down when I'm using the light function. So both of these cameras are advertised as being able to record in 4K. I don't actually think that's much of a benefit. It's great to have a big resolution, and yes, you can zoom in, and if you wanted to see a number plate or some details you can do, but I find full HD or 1080p good enough, and what using a low resolution does is it increases your battery life, and I do believe that the battery life that Cycliq quote is from a lower resolution. It's not from running it in 4K. So if you're going to use this sort of thing, I definitely try and run the lowest resolution you can whilst it's still being good quality, so 1080p. A 4K recording it'd be great and fine, but then I just find that when you're trying to work with the files afterwards and you're trying to cut them up and export them, they're just bigger and, you know, more memory, and I'm well set up for that sort of thing because I do this. I've got a good laptop and file transfer system and all that sort of stuff, but not everybody has, and I think having a low resolution makes it more accessible, so you can just do it on your phone easily and that sort of thing. So the footage quality, now I am a bit of a footage snob through doing YouTube. Yeah, I'm always looking at what's the frame rate and what's the resolution and all these other things. The footage is actually good enough, plenty good enough for the purpose it's intended for. I'm not wanting for any more than what these deliver. The most important thing for this sort of camera, I think, is the stability. So you might find brands like GoPro, you can shake the camera around and the footage looks really smooth. They're not as good as GoPros, but they don't need to be. I find that the footage is plenty stable enough, even when I'm riding over the British roads that we have, you know, potholes, gravel, that sort of thing. It's plenty stable enough to still be able to see what you're looking at, so quite impressed with that. My only frustration with the video and the video processing side is that the rear camera does connect to the app on your phone, and you can transfer the footage from the camera to your phone and export it from there and do what you like with it, whereas the front camera has to be plugged into a computer. You can't transfer the footage from there to your phone, which is a bit annoying, but for the purpose I'm using it for, the majority of footage I'm taking is from the rear camera, so I've not been troubled by it more than once or twice. But for that time that you do need to use the front camera, like, as I said, I'm set up, I've got memory card readers and a laptop and so on. If you're just relying on this and a phone, you wouldn't be able to do that. So using these things as lights, how good are they as lights? Now, I always, regardless of the weather, time of day, etc., have flashing lights on my bike, so I'd always have them on low flash. There's a variety of different modes. There's low flash, high flash, low solid, solid, high solid, organic, and then pulse. And to me, pulse looks very similar to flash, and there's a whole table of different battery lives. But basically, flashing lights are going to last loads longer battery-wise than solid lights. So when I'm riding during the day, I'll always have flashing, and I think they're a bit more visible as well, to be honest. They catch your eye a bit better. And the solid beam is the most high intensity battery draining, but of course if it's dark you're going to need the solid beam. So with the rear light, I'd always have it on high flash, but I think the low flash is a bit too low to use during the day, and because the battery life is so good, high flash doesn't really drain it that fast. I've always had it on that. The only time I'd use solid rear is if I'm in like a big chain gang ride and you don't want to be flashing light in people's eyes, but to be honest, my club don't worry too much about that sort of thing anyway, so I generally just leave it on flash. I might knock it down to low flash, for example. The front light, again, the flash is exactly the same. I don't know the exact lumens, but you can see some footage of me riding at different light intensities, and I'll put on screen which they are. The front one, to use it as a light to see, so to have it on high beam to see on the road, I'm going to say it's okay. It's not amazing, it is enough. I think I'm perhaps, again, a bit of a light snob in that I've got a big light that I use off-road and when I'm going on bikepacking trips and so on. And when you crank that bad boy up, you can see like widespread and see for a while. This is enough to see, and it's absolutely fine for town riding. If I was in the middle of the Peak District and absolutely no street lights, I'd have to take it steady. I'd have to not be thinking, oh, I can't go more than like 15 miles an hour or so because I can't see what's coming at me. It's borderline all right. And the only other frustration with that is I'm finding that I have to tilt the camera down quite a bit to be able to get the light where I want it on the road, and then that is a bit too low for the footage. Again, it's okay, it still captures everything in front of me but I really like having it up so you can see everything, and if anything happens, there's no doubt in my mind that, oh, that's going to have captured it. So it's only a factor when it's really dark, and I can just adjust it by adjusting it on the GoPro attachment, but yeah, just something to think about. So I think the biggest problem or discussion point for this sort of thing is battery life. It's the biggest concern. You don't want to be stranded out riding in the dark with no lights at all, so that's definitely a big worry of mine. Now, I haven't timed how many minutes of these lasted for in each setting. What I have done is I've tested using them over a variety of different rides that I go on. I've got a real good gauge now of how much battery I need to be able to get through my sort of ride. So for example, if I go out on a Sunday, I'll ride for between 3 and 3.5 hours. We'll have a cafe stop. I'll turn them off at the cafe stop, and when I get home, they have used about 60% of the battery. So I'm like, okay, I'd need to charge them again before going out, but I'm not close to running out. So I know for Sunday ride, absolutely fine, no problem. Because it's during the day, I don't need to use the constant mode, that's just on flashing. A couple of months ago, when it was still summer evenings in the UK, I was using them on flashing mode on my midweek club rides, and that was using less than half the battery. I'm out for two and a bit hours, and I know then that if I forget to charge them before my next evening club ride, I can get another one of those out just. Again, I'd probably be starting to worry about it, but I think it would just about get those two done. When I flick that onto the constant mode, so I might start the ride with flashing, but then I'm doing about an hour to an hour and a half with the full beam on the front so I can actually see where I'm riding. That's using more battery, and when I was getting back from those rides, it was using about 60% of the battery, 65% perhaps. The rear one had more than that left because I wouldn't switch it to constant on the rear, but that front one would drain more because I'm using that constant high beam. And that just tells me then that in the winter, if I'm doing only half the ride with constant beam on, I still need to definitely charge that before the next ride. In terms of actually charging the things, so there's a USB-C port on the side of the front one, on the side of the rear one. Now again, I haven't timed this, but USB-C is the new normal standard for in Europe, the charging standards, and they actually work pretty well. So especially when I've got a fast charging plug and a USB-C to USB-C wire, they do charge fairly fast. Now they are big batteries inside of these things, so they're not going to charge in 20 minutes, but definitely within, I think it was like an hour and a half-ish with a good charger. So it's good enough that you know that, oh, I'm going out for a ride in an hour or two and I haven't charged, there's a good chance it's going to be charged by the time you need to go out. Another useful thing about these is that because they're not like, you can't throw them in a lake waterproof, they're definitely rainproof and there's a IPX rating. I've tested them in pretty bad weather in the Peak District, and I've washed my bike a few times with these cameras on, and I've not been like pounding them with a pressure washer, but I have been squirting a hose pipe all over it, and they still work absolutely fine. So to know that I don't have to take them off to wash a bike then put them back on is a big help. I think the only other thing I wanted to talk about was that the rear camera doesn't have a radar function, so you don't get an alert on your bike computer when a vehicle is behind you. I've had that in the past, but I don't really feel the need for it now. I think it just makes me more nervous, if anything. And I also think if the camera had a radar function similar to other brands, that sometimes other brands can have it where it censors something and then it starts recording, that vastly increases the battery life because it's not recording all the time. So that could be an option for Cycliq in the future, but for what I'm using it for at the minute, the battery life is good enough to not have to worry about that sort of thing. So my project, or my commitment to, I don't know what I'm calling it to be honest, but what I'm essentially doing is I'm making sure that I run these cameras all the time, and if I have an experience on the road in which I think that wasn't ideal, or I felt at risk there, or I think there might have been an offence committed, I'm just reporting it to Derbyshire Police. I'm taking the time to upload the footage, write the spiel about what happened, and just leave it up to them. I'm trying not to get too emotionally involved in, oh, I'm going to get that driver or get that. I can't, I've got mental capacity for that. I don't want to, you know, start being like miserable and hate cycling essentially. But I just think that if I can take whatever positive action I can, then somebody else who isn't motivated to you know, give somebody a punishment or something makes the decision. So in the last couple of months I've made several reports, some close passes that have been addressed, some close passes that haven't been, you know, given any sort of sanction, and I look at them and I think with the police eye on it, yes, there's not an offence committed, but just things like drivers overtaking you when there's something oncoming and cutting in right in front of you, that doesn't often like breach a law or anything, but it's just not good driving. There was an occasion I had where a branded up company car overtook me just before a blind bend, cut in front of me, slammed the brakes on, and as we went around the corner, then overtook another car going over a blind crest, and a car came the other way, and I reported that to the police, and that was no further action. But then I did send it to the company as well and said, you know, is this how you should be driving? And they came back and said, you know, no, very sorry and all of that. So I think I'm just taking whatever action I can, and if you're going to do stuff like that in a company branded vehicle, then, you know, expect that cyclists are going to have cameras on. One that was surprising that the police did take action and send a warning letter on was a car pulling out on me as I was riding towards them. So there was a parked car on the opposite side of the road. I'm riding down my lane, and the car, you know, sees me, pulls out, and I have to slam the brakes on and shouting, etc. Now, that sort of thing, you might think, oh, whatever, cyclist, you think you're king of the road, you know, you think everybody should move out your way. Well, no, but I just don't think somebody should pull into my lane as I'm riding towards them and potentially cut. You know, if I was just daydreaming or wasn't paying attention or didn't brake fast enough, I'd have been straight into the front of it. So I think things like that, I'm just gonna, if I'm in doubt, I'm still just gonna report it. And the police obviously thought that was an offence on that one. So yeah, it's just worthwhile doing. So that is essentially my commitment or my plan. I'm just going to be taking whatever positive action I can to try and make the roads around me and hopefully wider a bit safer for vulnerable road users to use. I know there's mobility scooter riders, there's horse riders, walkers, whatever. There's a lot of risk out there, and I can't reiterate this enough, cyclists aren't perfect. If I was to see one of my club mates or somebody I know or somebody I'm riding with or just somebody I see doing something on a bike that I think is dangerous or illegal and so on, like, although, you know, I'm not a law enforcement, but I'd say to them, especially if it was a friend, I don't think that's the best, mate, perhaps you shouldn't do that, you know. So it's not like, oh, I'm only aiming this at drivers. I think everybody should be following the law of the road and you know, doing what they can to look after each other, because it's wild out there. The stats are crazy, people getting injured on the roads all the time, dying frequently, and that is just terrible. I'd hate for one day that to be me, but also I'd hate for it to be one of my friends and family. So that's the underlying, you know, motivation for this sort of thing. And thanks to Cycliq for getting involved with me doing this. It's really helped me actually just get kitted out with the cameras. What I also like about Cycliq is they have an upride function, which is where you upload your footage of whatever you think, and they share it in their community to raise awareness about the risks of being on the road. Now again, they don't just post, you know, drivers doing things wrong, but they're just trying to post things to show that cyclists have cameras on their bikes. You should expect cyclists to have cameras on their bikes, and walkers and whoever else, so don't do anything stupid on the roads and put people at risk. And I like that they're creating like a bit of a community. There's a map of the UK, and there's little dots where you can see what people have reported and they've put on through the upride function. There's a bit of an empty spot in Derbyshire, so I'm not aiming to fill it, but I'm definitely, you know, hoping that my reports are going to make that look a bit more filled out, so that people can see you know, perhaps what action's been taken in what area, because they do share that as well. And I think that's pretty cool and interesting. You don't see any other brands doing that. Feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you've got any questions about the Cycliq cameras, how I'm getting on with them, or any specific questions, please do feel free to ask me as well. If you've been taking any positive action, please do let me know what your thoughts are about it down below, what you've been doing, what successes and failures you've seen, and if you think it's improved your area at all. Thank you for watching, and stay safe out there.